I 29M kept that WhatsApp screenshot as my lock screen for 2 years. Not because I enjoy pain, because I needed to see Mabel's face every morning, middle finger up, Darren's mouth on her neck, my dead mother's inheritance on his wrist, so I'd remember exactly what I was working toward. Mabel and I were together 4 years, moved in after year 2, lease in my name. I paid most of the rent because I earned more. Darren was my best friend since 15. He came to every family dinner, knew my mom Gail, knew where I kept documents, even had my banking login from when he handled a payment for me during a hospital stay. That's the level of trust we're talking about. Why Mabel did it wasn't mysterious. She resented my mom Gail, who never warmed to her, made comments about her spending, questioned why she quit her receptionist job after moving in with me. When Gail passed and left me an inheritance, Mabel said she deserved a share because she'd tolerated Gail's attitude, told me she'd earned that money. When I said that's not how inheritance works, something between us broke for good. She started treating me like I owed her, and Darren always had this quiet jealousy, commenting on my apartment, my car, my life with this edge like he couldn't figure out why I had things he didn't. So Thursday afternoon at work, I opened WhatsApp expecting something normal. Instead I got that photo. My fiancé and my best friend departure gate heading to Dubai on my money. $50K drained from savings. Emergency fund gone. The engagement ring I still owed payments on still on her finger. And a pregnancy announcement tossed in like a joke. I sat at my desk for 10 minutes. Then I called my bank. They confirmed Mabel had moved everything from the joint household account over 3 days while I worked double shifts. She'd accessed savings using the login I gave her when we were planning the wedding. I started the dispute process that afternoon. Next was the apartment. Her name wasn't on the lease. I called my landlord, explained enough, and had the locks changed by Friday morning. I packed everything belonging to Mabel and Darren. He'd been leaving clothes and stuff at my place for months, which suddenly made perfect sense, into bags and dropped them with Mabel's sister Molly. She grabbed them and shut the door fast. She already knew what her sister had done. I didn't reply to Mabel's message. I let them fly to Dubai thinking I was home falling apart. Instead, I spent the weekend pulling bank statements, engagement ring receipts, lease documents, and I called a lawyer about the account drainage. Here's what Mabel didn't know. Gail's inheritance sat in a separate account she never had access to. She got the savings and emergency fund, but the inheritance was untouched. And that money was about to become my most important weapon. By Monday, Mabel's WhatsApp messages started. Casual at first, testing. By Wednesday, full paragraphs. Darren messaged too saying he was sorry it happened this way, but Mabel was unhappy and he was just being there for her. Being there for her. With my money. In Dubai. Wearing a watch from my dead mother's legacy. Then Thursday night, exactly 1 week after the photo, my phone went off. 117 messages. Mabel cycling through threats, begging, explanations, crying voice notes in 4 hours. Darren had walked out on her at the hotel, took the remaining cash, booked himself a separate room, told her he never planned anything long-term, that it was basically a free vacation. She was stranded in Dubai, pregnant, no return ticket because Darren booked everything under his name. Molly called 30 times. Their mother Wyatt left a voicemail asking how I could do this to her daughter, as if I robbed someone and fled the country. Wyatt always enabled Mabel, called every quit job self-care, said I was controlling for questioning overspending. Hearing her blame me confirmed my plan was working because it meant Mabel had told them a version where she was the victim. I didn't reply to anyone. Not yet. I was waiting for something specific and it was coming. I'd filed a bank dispute, talked to my lawyer, and started a process none of them knew about involving the lease, the ring debt, and what Mabel left behind when she ran. 2 years of preparation were about to start paying off. Okay, so this man got the WhatsApp equivalent of a declaration of war, middle finger, neck kisses, his dead mom's inheritance on another man's wrist, and his first move was to sit quietly for 10 minutes and then call the bank. That is a level of emotional discipline that genuinely concerns me because I would have been on a flight to Dubai with a PowerPoint presentation about betrayal. But no, this guy went full chess grandmaster, changed the locks, lawyered up, organized every receipt, and just waited. While they were popping bottles in Dubai thinking he was crying into a pillow, this man was building a legal filing cabinet. And the beautiful poetic justice of Darren abandoning Mabel at the hotel because of course he did, right? A man who would betray his best friend of 14 years for a free luxury trip is not suddenly going to develop loyalty toward the woman he betrayed him with. Mabel picked a snake as her escape vehicle and then was shocked when it bit her, too. And Wyatt calling to blame him. Ma'am, your daughter sent a middle finger selfie from a departure gate funded by theft and you're calling the victim to ask how he could do this. The delusion is generational, apparently. This family treats accountability like it's a foreign language nobody bothered to learn. Update 1. So a lot of you asked for more details and honestly, I've been waiting to write this because the next part is where things started getting complicated in ways I didn't fully expect. If you read the original post, you know where we left off. Mabel stranded in Dubai, Darren ghosted her, 117 messages on my phone, and me sitting on a plan I'd been building since the day I saw that photo. First thing I need to explain is the ring situation because a lot of people asked. The engagement ring was purchased through a financing plan. Monthly payments, 12 months remaining when Mabel flew to Dubai still wearing it. The agreement was in my name. The ring was legally my property until fully paid off. And even after that, in my state, an engagement ring given in contemplation of marriage is a conditional gift. She broke the engagement by literally flying to another country with another man. My lawyer confirmed I had grounds to demand it back. And if she refused, I could pursue it in small claims. That ring was worth about $8,000 retail, and I still owed $4,000 on it. So, that became pressure point number 1. I waited 2 full weeks before I responded to anyone. During that time, Mabel made it back from Dubai. Molly eventually wired her money for a flight home, which I found out because Wyatt called my phone and left a voicemail ranting about how her daughter had to beg her own sister for airfare while I sat comfortable in my apartment. Wyatt actually said I should be ashamed that Mabel had to fly economy after what she'd been through. What she'd been through. As if she hadn't stolen $50,000 from me to fund that trip. I saved that voicemail to... When Mabel got back, she went straight to Wyatt's house because obviously she couldn't come back to the apartment. Locks changed her stuff already with Molly. And here's where the first new complication hit. Mabel started telling Wyatt and Molly that the pregnancy was mine, not Darren's. She flipped the entire story. In her original WhatsApp, she literally captioned it saying the baby wasn't mine. Threw that in my face as a victory. Now suddenly she needed me to be the father because Darren wanted nothing to do with her. Was living at her mother's house with 0 income and a baby coming. I know this because Molly texted me. Not to take sides, Molly had always been the more reasonable one in that family, but because Mabel was pressuring Molly to convince me to talk. Molly sent me a long message saying, "Look, I know what my sister did was wrong, but she's pregnant and scared and living on our mom's couch, and she just wants to have a conversation." I didn't respond for 3 days. Not because I was being strategic about it, honestly. I just needed to figure out exactly what to say. When I finally replied, it wasn't to Mabel. It was to Molly. I told her I wanted 3 things before any conversation would happen. 1. The engagement ring returned. 2. A written acknowledgement from Mabel of exactly how much money was taken from my accounts. 3. A paternity test once the baby was born. I told Molly these were non-negotiable and I wasn't discussing anything until all 3 were addressed. Molly said she'd pass it along. Mabel's response came through WhatsApp about 4 hours later and it was exactly what I expected. She agreed to the paternity test, dodged the written acknowledgement completely, and on the ring she said she'd already sold it. Sold it. She'd sold my engagement ring that I was still making payments on while she was in Dubai to cover expenses after Darren took the cash. So now, I was still paying for a ring that she'd sold for a fraction of its value to survive a trip funded by robbing me. My lawyer said this actually strengthened my position for small claims because now it wasn't just about returning property, it was about the full replacement value. But here's where things really started spiraling. Darren came back from Dubai about a week after Mabel. And this is the part that made me genuinely reconsider what kind of person he'd been the entire time I knew him. Darren didn't come crawling back to apologize. He went on the offensive. He started reaching out to mutual friends from our group, people we'd known since high school, and telling them his version. In his version, Mabel had seduced him. He felt trapped and I was overreacting to what was basically a bad vacation. He actually used the phrase bad vacation. $50K, my mother's inheritance converted to a luxury watch, a pregnancy, a middle finger at the departure gate, a bad vacation. So now I had two fronts. Mabel at Wyatt's house trying to rewrite the pregnancy timeline and Darren running a campaign through our friend group to minimize what happened. And both of them were about to find out that the pressure I'd been building wasn't just about the money because the apartment situation was about to become a much bigger problem for everyone. See, when I packed Mabel's stuff and dropped it at Molly's, I also packed Darren's things that had been slowly accumulating at my place. Clothes, a gaming console, some personal documents he'd left in my spare room. Among those documents was something Darren probably forgot he'd stored at my place. And no, it wasn't some dramatic smoking gun. It was paperwork related to the lease on Darren's own apartment, which revealed that Darren had actually been subletting his place illegally for months while essentially moving into mine. His landlord didn't know, and his subletter had been paying Darren directly. Cash, while Darren's name stayed on the lease. I hadn't done anything with that information yet, but I had it, and Darren didn't know I had it. That's when Wyatt showed up at my apartment building on a Saturday morning. Not Mabel, not Molly. Wyatt herself, standing at my door, ready for a fight I'd been preparing for since the day her daughter sent me that photo. The pregnancy flip is genuinely one of the most cold-blooded moves I've ever heard. She literally weaponized that baby's paternity like a game of three-card Monty. Now it's Darren's to hurt him. Now it's his to trap him, depending on who's more useful today. And poor Molly is out here being the family messenger, the airport ATM, and the emotional translator. And she doesn't even realize she's being used as a chess piece by her own sister. But honestly, the real masterclass in this update is our guy's 3 demands. Ring, written acknowledgement, paternity test. He didn't ask for an apology, didn't ask for explanations, didn't give her a single emotional foothold, just cold transactional requirements like a collections agency with a personal grudge. And Darren calling this a bad vacation. Brother, people have bad vacations when the hotel pool is closed or the buffet gives them food poisoning. You stole $50,000, wore a dead woman's inheritance on your wrist, impregnated your best friend's fiancée, and abandoned her in a foreign country. That's not a bad vacation. That's a federal case study in being a terrible human being, and then leaving your lease documents at the apartment of the man you just robbed is the kind of carelessness that only comes from someone who genuinely never respected you enough to think you'd fight back. Update 2. Alright, buckle up because after the last update things spiraled in directions I didn't fully expect and I need to get this down. Shout out to everyone who said stay the course. You were right, but you have no idea what showed up at my door that Saturday. Around 9 a.m. got in through the main entrance behind another tenant and started knocking. I opened the door because I'd been expecting this. She came in already mid-argument like the conversation started in her car. Mabel was sleeping on her couch, had no income, the pregnancy was making her sick every morning, and all of this was somehow my responsibility because I had the apartment and the stable life. She kept saying a real man steps up regardless. Then she said Gail would be ashamed of how I was acting. Bringing up my dead mother in the apartment Gail helped me furnish. That was the line. I told Wyatt she doesn't get to use Gail's name to guilt me into supporting the woman who converted Gail's inheritance into a gift for the guy she was sleeping with. I told her Mabel sold the ring I was still paying for. The $50K was gone. And if she wanted to discuss what a real man does, then let's discuss what a real mother does when her daughter robs her fiancé and flies to Dubai with his best friend. Wyatt argued the money was shared, that living together makes everything communal, that I was being vindictive when a baby was involved. She tried claiming that because we discussed marriage our accounts were essentially joint property. I told her my lawyer disagreed and I'd filed in small claims for the ring. She went pale. She didn't know about the legal action. She asked if I was really taking a pregnant woman to court, and I told her no. I was taking a thief to court over payments I still owed plus the retail value of property she sold without authorization. Within hours of Wyatt leaving, Mabel texted me directly. Not begging this time. Angry. Wyatt had told her about the small claims, and Mabel accused me of trying to destroy her at her most vulnerable. She said I was weaponizing the legal system, that she had no money to fight. And if I continued, she'd make sure our entire social circle knew what kind of person I was. I told her to go ahead, because during those 2 weeks of silence, I'd been doing something specific. I sent every mutual friend the original WhatsApp screenshot individually, the departure gate photo, the caption, everything. No commentary, just the image. 8 people in our group, 7 responded with shock. The 8th was Miller, who'd been Darren's old roommate and already knew Darren had been spending suspicious amounts of time at my place for months. Miller had actually confronted Darren about it before everything happened. So, when Darren tried his bad vacation story with the friend group, it landed on ground I'd already prepared. Nobody bought it, and Darren's response to losing the social battle was exactly what I was hoping. He reached out to me on WhatsApp. Long message, brotherhood angle, 14 years of friendship, one mistake shouldn't define everything. Mabel pursued him. I responded just enough to keep him talking, because I needed admissions in writing, and angry, defensive people always over-explain. He admitted the trip was planned 3 weeks before the departure photo. He admitted he knew where the money was coming from. He admitted he picked the watch himself. Each admission, screenshot, saved. He was so focused on sounding like the passive participant that he kept proving the opposite. Then I played my card. I mentioned casually that I'd found some of his paperwork, including documents about his apartment lease. Asked how the subletting situation was going. 6 hours of silence. When he responded, the tone had completely shifted. Cautious, clipped, asking exactly what I'd found. I told him enough, and that his landlord would probably find it interesting. He said everyone sublets. I told him not everyone does it while violating lease terms on unstabilized and pocketing the cash. Darren offered to pay back some of the money, not all, some, which told me 2 things. He still had cash from the trip, and I'd found a pressure point that genuinely scared him. Losing that apartment meant losing below market rent, losing his subletting income, and having an eviction situation on his record. But while I was working on Darren, something shifted with Mabel. Molly texted me late on a Wednesday, short message. Mabel had gone to her first prenatal appointment and the pregnancy dating didn't match what she'd been telling everyone. The timeline put conception during the period when Mabel and Darren were already together, weeks before Dubai. Mabel had been lying about the pregnancy timing to everyone, including Wyatt, and Molly was the only one who knew because she'd driven Mabel to the appointment. Molly was furious. Not at me, at her sister. Because Mabel had spent weeks using Molly as a messenger to convince me the baby was mine, and now Molly realized she'd been a pawn. That's when I knew the final phase could start, and it involved Darren's apartment, the small claims case, and a conversation with Wyatt that was going to tear that family apart from the inside. Wyatt invoking Gail's name in the apartment Gail helped furnish. That's not just crossing a line, that's digging up a grave to use the headstone as a weapon. And I love that this man didn't lose his composure. He just turned it around with surgical precision. You want to talk about what a real man does? Let's talk about what a real mother does. That's not a comeback, that's a mirror held up so close she could count her own pores. But the absolute genius move in this whole update is how he handled Darren. He didn't threaten, didn't yell, didn't confront, he just kept him talking. Because angry people who think they're being clever will hand you their entire case file if you just let them monologue long enough. Darren sat there trying to paint himself as the innocent bystander who just accidentally fell into a first-class seat to Dubai, and whoops, there's a luxury watch on his wrist. How did that get there? And every single sentence was another nail in his own coffin, and then the subletting card dropped so that kind of betrayal from family hits different because you can't even be angry properly. You're just sitting in a parking lot outside a clinic realizing the person you advocated for was playing you the entire time. Final update. Last update. Almost didn't write it, but you guys stuck with me through 3 posts, so here's how everything landed. After Molly found out about the pregnancy timeline, I gave it 2 days, then contacted Wyatt directly. Had her number from months back when we were all still pretending to be a functioning family. Told her we needed to talk face to face about Mabel's situation. She agreed immediately, thinking she could still pressure me into stepping up. We met at a diner near her neighborhood on a Sunday morning. I laid it out piece by piece. The prenatal dating didn't match Mabel's claims. Conception lined up with Darren, not me. Mabel had been lying to her own mother for weeks about whose baby this was, using Wyatt's guilt and protectiveness to build a safety net. Wyatt tried arguing that doctors are sometimes off by weeks, that Mabel would never lie about this. I told her to ask Molly, who was at the appointment with the paperwork. That conversation broke Wyatt's campaign against me. Not because she became my ally, she didn't, but now she had a war inside her own house. She confronted Mabel, and according to Molly, Mabel's defense was that she didn't know for sure whose baby it was, so she'd been telling each side what they wanted to hear, which was worse than straight lying because it meant she'd been strategically playing everyone to keep her options open. Wyatt was angry, but trapped because her pregnant daughter was on her couch. So, Wyatt told Mabel she had 60 days to figure out her living situation because she wasn't going to be lied to in her own home. Mabel was now on a clock with no income, a pregnancy she'd lied about, and small claims coming. That's when she finally called me. First time we'd spoken in over a month. She started saying she knew she'd messed up and wasn't going to pretend otherwise, then spent 20 minutes doing exactly that. The Dubai trip was a breakdown, a moment of weakness. Darren manipulated the WhatsApp photo was sent in the heat of the moment. I let her run out of excuses, then asked one question, "Where's my money?" She said she didn't have it. I asked about the ring money. She said she used it to survive in Dubai. I told her small claims was proceeding for the full ring value plus remaining payments. She asked if there was any way to stop this. I told her yes, full written acknowledgement of every dollar taken, a repayment plan for the $50K with specific monthly amounts and timeline, and the paternity test. She argued she couldn't afford repayment. I told her that wasn't my problem, and if she didn't agree voluntarily, the court would establish the debt anyway with a judgment on her record. She hung up. Now, Darren. I told him via WhatsApp I had his lease documents and subletting evidence. He could pay back $25K in structured repayments starting immediately, or I'd send his lease paperwork to his buildings management company. Darren called me every name over text. Said I was blackmailing him. I told him I was giving him an option more generous than he deserved, and if he wanted to talk about fairness, he could start with the watch bought with my dead mother's money. I told him to return that too. Full value or the physical item. Darren went quiet for 5 days, then agreed. $25K over 18 months. He returned the watch through Miller, who dropped it at my place in the original box. I didn't keep it. Sold it and put the money back into the account where Gail's inheritance lived. That felt right. Mabel agreed to repayment terms after Wyatt pressured her, not out of solidarity with me, but because Wyatt didn't want the embarrassment of her daughter having a court judgment. Mabel signed the acknowledgement, agreed to monthly payments from whatever future income she'd earn, and took the paternity test. Results confirmed the baby was Darren's. I forwarded those results to Darren with zero commentary. Where everyone ended up. Mabel at Wyatt's with a ticking 60-day clock, repayment obligations, and a baby whose father wanted nothing to do with her. Darren paying me monthly from an apartment he could barely afford now that the subletting income was gone. Wyatt dealing with her daughter's lies while the family reputation she cared so much about crumbled from the inside. Molly stopped speaking to Mabel entirely after the paternity lie. And me. I changed my lock screen back to default last week. First time in 2 years. Not because I forgave anyone. There is no forgiveness here. I want that crystal clear. But that photo did its job. Every morning for 2 years it reminded me what I was working toward. And now that I'm standing in exactly the spot I plan to reach. And they're all exactly where their own choices put them. Mabel's middle finger at that departure gate was supposed to be the last image of our relationship. Instead it became the first page of the plan that took everything back. Selling the watch and putting that money back into Gail's inheritance account. That's the detail that tells you everything about who this man is. He didn't keep a trophy, didn't wear it ironically, didn't post about it. He just quietly returned his mother's legacy to where it belonged and moved on. And the paternity results forwarded to Darren with zero commentary. No speech, no told you so, no gloating, just the document. Because what are you going to say? The paperwork speaks louder than any monologue ever could. And honestly, Mabel's defense that she was telling each side what they wanted to hear is somehow the most damning thing she said across 4 posts. Because she wasn't panicking. She wasn't confused. She was managing multiple audiences like a PR firm for her own life. Calculating which version of reality served her best with each person. That's not a breakdown, that's a business model. And now, everyone's standing in the wreckage of their own choices. Darren paying monthly rent on a friendship he burned down. Mabel on a 60-day couch timer with a baby whose